for the other purposes and stuff. So let me just get my questions out. Okay, so all right, sweet. So can you so first off, can you start off by giving an introduction of just like who you are and like what you do?
Sure. My name is Irina Tsukerman. I'm a human rights and national security lawyer. I'm also a geopolitical analyst. I have a strategic advisory focused on media and security issues. I also host a video podcast on the Coalition Radio called the Washington Outsider Report. And there I discuss in-depth global issues pertaining to security, to foreign affairs, technology, and anything else that strikes interest at the moment. I've been also closely following the situation in Israel as one of my interests. My background is Middle East and North Africa, so that certainly is part of that.
Awesome, thank you. And you give me a brief overview of what exactly is happening in Israel right now?
So as of yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu froze the judicial reform process for 3 months to make room for a more inclusive process and dialogue with different factions. Most of the protests subsided, but there are still some groups who want a complete cancellation of the reform, which is probably not going to happen. Basically, how did it all begin? The discussion of judicial reform has been in the works for some time, for a very long time, but it wasn't on the official agenda of the new government. They have not campaigned on the platform of the judicial reform. One of the issues everyone agrees, most people agree that the reform is needed is there are structural issues with the way the Supreme Court of Israel and the judiciary in general is run. Many are concerned that there is a conflict of interest because the judges get to appoint their own successors. That is a completely different system from the United States, where the Supreme Court justices are appointed by the president. They go through a confirmation process with Senate, and they are appointed for life unless they choose to retire early for medical or other reasons. In Israel, that's not the case, and that caused all sorts of political tensions. However, many people had a problem with two issues. First, that this process was being pushed very quickly without any warning, despite not being part of the official platform. Second, that it was not sufficiently inclusive. There was no effort to build a broad social consensus around the issue. And third, many people believed that it was exceedingly self-serving and one-sided, and ultimately would create more political problems than it would solve. Some claim that Netanyahu is pushing this reform at this time, in this particular manner, out of concern for his political future in the event he gets indicted, and that supposedly he's pushing these reforms to basically create a judicial political majority that would shield him from criminal investigations that could cost him the post. I don't know whether it's true, but what I do know is that as a result, different factions with completely different interests across the country came together to protest the manner in which it was being done. Some don't want any reforms at all, but as I said, because of the nature of the process, that's not likely to happen. Some reform, I think, even critics and opponents of Netanyahu and his government agree that the current structure is unsustainable and not particularly helpful to any government to function properly. But there is a broad range of opinions on how it should be done, and most agree that there should be a diverse dialogue and perhaps some sort of a compromise with the left-leaning factions. The truth is, many of the people taking part in the protests are not necessarily left-leaning. And there's also been accusations of astroturfing, claiming that the Biden administration was interfering in this process through public overt means, which is true, and through covert means, which is arguable. I don't know whether there's been sufficient evidence of covert funding of on sufficient scale to make a difference. There's been some organizations that in the past supposedly were galvanized against Netanyahu and political groups that supposedly got US funding from the Obama administration that are also taking part in this protest, but they are not the only, or for that matter, the main organization or group taking part. There's also been a huge push by the Histadrut, which is the union in Israel, and it's very different from the union structure in the United States because you have entire industries part of a mandatory union that would not be part of it in the US. They're not, these industries include students. In other words, students, not just TAs or assistant students who are working, but just students. And in the university, they have their own union that can boycott universities and just not show up. You have professional diplomats, part of a union, despite the fact that, and they can freeze entire foreign policy work, which is exactly what happened. You have medical professionals, doctors, not just nurses, who are unionized, and they can call off scheduled elective surgeries, which is also what happened. So this Histadrut, which is a central union answerable for all these industries, called for general strike yesterday, and basically brought the country to a halt. And there was also a massive physical protest of hundreds of thousands of people, literally blocking the roads from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and paralyzing physical efforts to locate for people who did want to go to work. So it was a massive, massive protest. The entire consulate general in New York resigned. There are rumors that the consul general has political aspirations for a higher office, and he chose this timing due to convenience rather than necessarily outrage. But regardless, it paralyzed activity in New York as well because the entire staff is now gone. And the prime minister also fired the defense minister, who criticized these reforms and called for a freeze for precisely to the end that Netanyahu ultimately adopted. It's not clear whether he's going to be reinstated or not, but there was a lot of political deliberation even within Likud, Netanyahu's own party. Some people were leaking information in an effort to pressure him to come to the decision. Others arguably were considering boycotting this and withdrawing from the majority on this issue, which would have made the votes insufficient to be successful in the Knesset, the parliament. So politically right now, the situation is Netanyahu looks like he bowed to the pressure of all these different factions that came together. Some people are satisfied, some people are not. Nobody's particularly happy about the way it was ultimately handled. And there's a lot of grievances among various parties against each other. So the situation is not fully resolved, but the crisis has been largely averted and set aside. And the crisis was significant because even the military, not just reservists, but the active duty military was not showing up for duty. They were not showing up for duty as a means of boycott, which endangered the security and defense. And high-level officers warned about the possibility of terrorist attacks and other provocations as a result of the appearance of chaos and mismanaged situation overall. So this has been handled for now, but we don't know what's going to happen in 2 months and whether that process is going to be smooth and whether it will lead to any success or whether the government will have to push through the reforms. Regardless, whether there's going to be any consensus is too early to tell.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for that. And then kind of just for the rest of the interview, if you could give like like some shorter answers, that would really help. I'm just a little like time crunched at the moment, but
Sure,
so
no problems. Apologies. I wasn't,
uh,
yeah, I don't know how much people know about the situation, which is quite complicated. So that's why I felt I had to highlight different angles.
yeah, that's all right. So next question. Which way do you think this goes, and will the people get what they want?
Well, it's unclear what the people actually want because the political aspect of it is so complicated and because these reforms can be ultimately taken in any directions. Some people are actually pushing for an opportunity to create finally a constitution, which Israel currently does not have and which could resolve some of these issues. Personally, I think something similar to the US system would probably be the best and avoid most controversy, even though even in the United States, there is lately controversy about the number of judges, but at the very least, it would create a depoliticized, fair process that would work the same way, no matter who's in power. Ultimately, I think the people want a functional government. They want a prime minister who takes everyone's points of perspectives and interests into consideration, and they don't want the country paralyzed by controversy. I think so long as there's a genuine effort to be inclusive of different interests and concerns and to create an advisory process that informs the voting politicians on the legal situation, I think ultimately it will result in some sort of a workable solution, at least a step towards an improved system.
Awesome. Okay. And then 1 second. Sorry, my phone is still like falling asleep. In the upcoming elections season in Israel, does this pave the way for just a complete renewal of a leadership?
I don't think that the government will collapse as a result of it. The fact that it hasn't already, despite all the controversy, shows that the majority of the people still supports the government, and it was voted in by a very overwhelming and solid majority. But I do think that Netanyahu from now on is going to have to be very careful in the way he handles crisis and the way he deals with the different interests. I think the major concern is that his actions have been self-serving and not necessarily in the interests of the country and its security. So he is going to have to give it a lot of thought. I do think in the future, this could potentially, if done correctly, could solve many political problems, such as future elections, such as various judiciary systems, handling of protests and terrorist cases. All of these have been subject to a great deal of controversy as a result of unclear role, and some people have criticized the judiciary for exercising a complete veto power outside its authority and outside the role the judiciary should play in the society. So basically, people thought that the Supreme Court in Israel is excessively politicized. It's unclear whether the current reform will solve the politicization problem or create a different one.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. And then lastly, I know you said a lot about like what's happening and stuff, but is there anything else you would like to add?
I think one of the arguments the Biden administration was making is that Israel is at risk of losing its status as the only functional democracy in the Middle East as a result of Netanyahu's disagreement with all the people who protested. I would like to take issue with that. I think it's important to note that, first of all, the fact that this was handled largely peacefully and ultimately the government gave in to demands shows that there is a process very different from various dictatorships where things usually end very badly, either with revolutions and violent uprisings or with the government using deadly force against protesters in response. Quite obviously, this is not the case and not going to be the case. And there's going to be bickering with different sides, but that's a normal process. The other issue is that mass protests should not, they're a sign that people are allowed to have diverse and different opinions, but they should not be confused with democracy itself, because at the end of the day, a functional democracy, it's about a healthy political process, and that's where I actually think Israel could use a lot more work. It can, it's free in the sense that people can have opinions and speak loudly and criticize the government, but having a functional political system for an orderly society is just as important and as protest, because at the end of the day, venting your feelings does not bring you any closer to problem solving and resolving those issues and creating a more functional society.
Awesome. Thank you. That is the end of the interview. I thank you for your time and your patience and the little like time mix up on my end, and have a great day, I guess.
Thank you so much, and please share with me the link once it's ready.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have a good one.